My project this semester for 862 is entitled Exploring the Relationship Between Student Absenteeism and Student Literacy at the National Level. Chronic absenteeism is a term coined by Hetty Chang, who's the executive director of AttendanceWorks.org. And she defined chronic absenteeism as missing 10% or more of school for any reason. So this includes all reasons related to illness, truancy, across the board. 10% or more is considered to be chronically absent. According to NPR, it's estimated that more than 5 million students a year are chronically absent in the United States. AttendanceWorks.org says that more than 7 million students are missing so many days of school that they are academically at risk. Evidence notes that there is a relationship between poor student attendance and poor student achievement. For instance, Grand Rapids Public Schools noticed that when they looked at their data, they realized that coming to school had a direct impact on achievement. According to Grand Rapids Public Schools, improved student attendance increases student exposure to language, increases time on task, puts students on track for future academic success, increases college readiness, and is a reflection of student engagement. The National Center for Children in Poverty found that chronic absence in elementary school was associated with low academic performance, especially for students of color. However, the negative correlation holds true for all children, regardless of gender, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. The University of Chicago found that chronically absent middle school students were more likely to struggle once they reached high school. Within the research, there's solid evidence that attendance has an impact on student achievement and on student literacy at the elementary school level. It especially impacts children in poverty and children of color. There's also solid evidence that poor attendance in elementary school and middle school is an indicator of poor attendance and higher dropout rates once students get to high school. So this study sets out to investigate the relationship between chronic absenteeism at the high school level and high school students' literacy scores at the national level. There are two research questions. Specifically, what is the relationship between student absenteeism and reading scores at the national level for 8th grade and 12th grade students in 2015? And then, is there an ongoing gap in literacy from middle school to high school that widens over time? There were 6 different areas of investigation in this study, but those 6 areas boil down to these 2 questions. So for the literature review, the literature shows that there is definitely a relationship between student absenteeism and student achievement. Looking at grade level tests, students who are absent 10% or more of the time have lower NWEA scores. Also, standardized test scores indicate that students who are absent more than 10% of the time have lower standardized test scores. Bath Community Schools, where I teach, I pulled the College Board SAT scores, and within the class of 2018, those are current students who are currently graduating. Students who were absent during their senior year of high school, 10% or more, scored on average 54 points lower on the reading and writing portion of the SAT than students who were present 90% or more of the time. So right there is that 10% level is prevalent. Also, looking at credits earned towards graduation, that same Bath High School population, I pulled all of the credits that they had earned, and seniors who were chronically absent had earned 2 full credits less on average than seniors who were present 90% or more of the time. So 2 full credits would be 4 semester hours over the course of their high school career that they had earned less than students who were present more than 90% of the time. A 2004 study in Ohio schools found that frequent attendance at school was synonymous with higher proficiency test averages. The second point in the literature review is that chronic absenteeism is an indicator of other factors. Absenteeism is reciprocal with poverty, and there are physical and emotional health issues often with students who are chronically absent. Students who are absent a great deal often have instability in their housing. They don't have access to transportation, and they may have a very low school attachment. The third point of the literature review is that chronic absenteeism can exacerbate socioeconomic status disparities. When students aren't in school, they're not receiving access to many of the school services, like handing out medication regularly, getting regular meals. They also miss educational continuity and end up with holes in their education. The dropout rate goes up the more they are absent, and that then will end up with a higher unemployment rate over time. And so the socioeconomic disparities that exist are then exacerbated by poor school attendance, which directly affects communities. And finally, the fourth point of the literature review is that literacy can mitigate some of the socioeconomic disparities. When students have high literacy levels, they are earning employment skills and training. They are more employable. They're also being exposed to and learning middle-class language and communication, which is key to them being able to earn those higher wage jobs. And literacy builds a lifelong relationship with lifelong earnings. So the methods of the study were to use the NAEP Data Explorer, the National Assessment of Educational Progress Data Explorer. And I was looking specifically at reading comprehension and reading scores. Reading comprehension and reading composite scores and literary experience scores at the 8th grade and at the 12th grade. The NAEP Data Explorer, the reading assessments administered every 2 years in 4th and 8th grade and then periodically in 12th grade. It measures reading comprehension, locate and recall skills, integrate and interpret skills, and critique and evaluate skills. So the sample years I pulled were the 8th grade and 12th grade scores in 2015. I also looked at the 2011 8th grade scores in order to look to see if there was a gap that widened over time. And the single variable I looked at was variable B018101, which was how many days were you absent from school in the last month. It was a student-reported student factor. So the findings of this study, at the 8th grade level, student attendance was significantly correlated with achievement. When students were absent, really at any rate, there was a significant drop in achievement. This was both on the reading composite scores and on the literary experience scores. At the 12th grade level, the 10% rate, that cutoff of chronic absenteeism, was found to be the significant value. So if students were absent more than 2 times a month, there was significance to the drop in their scores. And there was a medium effect size related to attendance. The achievement gap, although the achievement gap did exist when I looked at 2011 8th graders and then 2015 12th graders, that same in theory group of students, the achievement gap held steady. It did not increase, however. So the gap remained constant over time. The gap did not get worse because of or in relationship to absenteeism. So for the discussion points, discussion point number 1 is that lower student attendance is significantly correlated with lower student literacy at the 8th grade and at the 12th grade level. Discussion point number 2 is the definition of chronic absenteeism as being 10% or more is an appropriate definition. At the 12th grade, that 10% cutoff was absolutely the critical point when it really had significance. At the 8th grade, absence was significant at any level. It was correlated with lower literacy scores across the board. And finally, the 4th point is that the achievement gap does not widen over time. Some limitations of the study. It's important to note that student factor B018101, I think that's a typo there, which was days absent from school in the last month. It was tracked at all grade levels. However, the first point is that there's no indication that this absent rate was consistent throughout the year. The Data Explorer did not track year-long attendance. It only asked students to report on their last month. So there's no way to know if that was just an anomaly in attendance or if students were always absent at that rate. And finally, the second point is that there's really no way to know that the students who were absent in 8th grade in 2011 were the same students who were absent in the 12th grade. It's just looking at the national score. So there's no way to know for sure that those are the same students who are chronically absent. Recommendations for future research. It's important to figure out if some strong community programming can mitigate some of those interrelated factors that impact student attendance. So those factors related to socioeconomic status, related to health and wellness, mental health, physical health, stability in housing. Can strong community program mitigate some of those factors and hopefully impact student attendance and therefore impact student achievement? And then the second question that's really important to explore is what type of programming works best? There are programs that are set up that are community-wide. There are programs that are district-based. There are programs that are state-mandated. And so what type of program works best? Conclusions of the study. Number one, chronic absenteeism has potential long-term negative effects on student literacy. And then, of course, those chronic long-term negative effects on student literacy will directly affect those communities and those students' futures. The second conclusion is that districts and communities need to build programming to address chronic absenteeism. We have to get the kids in school because student attendance in school is paramount, not only for achievement, but for all of the health and physical wellness factors that are addressed in schools. And finally, future research is needed to know what kind of programming can really help mitigate some of these factors and get our students in school regularly. Thank you so much for your time.